When I voiced Prime for the very first time, I was living with my brother Larry. He was a Marine, and I said, I'm going to an audition. I'm going to be a truck. And he started laughing. He said, a truck? And I said, this is a leader. This is a hero. And
Peter Cullen, the unmistakable voice of Optimus Prime and the beloved voice behind Eeyore, has died at 85, and the news has left generations of fans looking back at the final chapter of a career that made one voice sound like a hero to millions. Cullen died on Wednesday, August 26, 2026, at his home in Los Angeles, surrounded by his family, according to his agent Kevin Motley. But there is something important to understand about the story now spreading online. While people are searching for details about Peter Cullen's final hours and last public moments, no reliable report has disclosed a specific final interview, a final conversation, or a confirmed warning sign before his passing. His cause of death has also not been released. What has been confirmed is that the man behind one of the most recognizable voices in entertainment passed away peacefully at home with his loved ones around him, bringing an extraordinary career to an end. And perhaps that makes this loss even more emotional, because Peter Cullen did not simply provide a voice to a character. For more than 4 decades, his voice became part of the identity of Optimus Prime itself. When fans heard that deep, steady baritone, they did not just hear an actor speaking into a microphone. They heard leadership, courage, patience, and strength. Cullen first became Optimus Prime in the original Transformers animated series in the 1980s, beginning a relationship with the character that would continue across generations and eventually carry into the live-action films. For children who discovered Transformers decades ago, his voice was part of growing up. For adults who returned to the franchise later, that same voice created an immediate connection to the past. And for Cullen himself, Optimus Prime was never simply another job. The way he created the character's voice was deeply personal, inspired by his older brother Larry, a Vietnam War veteran. Cullen had been advised not to make the hero sound like a stereotypical tough character, but instead to find strength in gentleness. That idea became part of the foundation of the voice that would eventually become legendary. It is almost impossible to separate Optimus Prime from that philosophy now. The character was powerful without needing to sound cruel, commanding without constantly shouting, and emotional without losing his sense of responsibility. Cullen gave that balance a human quality, and that is why his performance stayed with audiences for so long. When Michael Bay's live-action Transformers movies arrived in 2007, Cullen returned as Optimus Prime, allowing a new generation to hear the same voice that longtime fans already knew by heart. He continued to reprise the role across the franchise, including Transformers: Rise of the Beasts in 2023. But Optimus Prime was only one part of Peter Cullen's extraordinary career. For another generation of viewers, he was Eeyore, the quiet and melancholic donkey from the Winnie the Pooh universe. Cullen voiced Eeyore in the New Adventures of Winnie the Pooh and later productions, creating a completely different sound from the commanding presence of Optimus Prime. That contrast showed just how much range he possessed. One moment, his voice could make a giant robot leader sound like the calmest person in the room. The next, it could make a gloomy cartoon donkey feel strangely warm, relatable, and unforgettable. And then there was another side of his career that many viewers may not have even realized belonged to the same man. Cullen provided the distinctive creature sounds for Predator, voiced Car in Knight Rider, and contributed to numerous animated series and films, including King Kong, Chip, Endale Rescue Rangers, Voltron, G.I. Joe, DuckTales, and many others. His career stretched across decades and across completely different styles of entertainment, but the voice always remained recognizable. That is why news of his death feels larger than the loss of one performer. It feels like the loss of a sound that has been present in people's lives for generations. And yet, the details surrounding his final hours remain private. Reports say Cullen died peacefully at his Los Angeles home, surrounded by family, but they do not provide a medical explanation or describe a specific final moment. That means some of the dramatic claims now appearing around the story should be treated carefully. There is no confirmed evidence in the reports available so far that Cullen gave a final interview specifically before his death, nor is there a confirmed statement identifying a particular warning sign that predicted his passing. The most accurate story is quieter, but perhaps more meaningful. An 85-year-old legendary performer reached the end of an extraordinary life surrounded by people who loved him, while leaving behind a body of work that will continue to speak long after he is gone. His family has asked fans to honor his legacy through compassion, integrity, and loyalty, remembering the philosophy that helped shape Optimus Prime's voice. Strength does not have to mean harshness. That message feels especially powerful now. Peter Cullen spent decades giving a fictional hero the ability to sound strong enough to lead and gentle enough to care. His work became so convincing that many fans grew up believing that Optimus Prime himself was a real source of guidance. For some, Cullen's voice represented childhood. For others, it represented a father figure, a mentor, or simply the sound of a character they trusted. And because that voice remained connected to Transformers for so many years, Cullen was able to cross an unusual boundary in entertainment. He was not just remembered by people who watched the original cartoon. He was remembered by their children as well. Someone could have first heard him in the 1980s, then introduced the same voice to their own children decades later, and suddenly 3 generations could recognize the same unmistakable sound. That kind of legacy is rare. It is also why the phrase "final hour" carries so much emotional weight when people search for Cullen's last moments. Fans naturally want one final piece of footage, one final interview, one final sentence that can somehow explain what happened. But real life rarely provides such a perfectly packaged ending. Sometimes the final chapter is private. Sometimes the people around the person are the only ones who truly know what those last moments were like. And in Cullen's case, the information released publicly tells us that he was at home and surrounded by family. There is something deeply fitting about that privacy considering the career he had. Peter Cullen spent much of his professional life creating characters who spoke to the world, but his own final moments were not turned into a public performance. His family was there, his loved ones were there, and the public learned about his passing afterward. No cause of death was disclosed, and no dramatic medical explanation has been confirmed. That uncertainty may leave fans with questions, but it should not erase what is known. Cullen was born in Montreal in 1941 and built a career that eventually made his voice recognizable across television, film, animation, and video games. He appeared on television in the 1960s and 1970s before moving deeper into voice acting, where his range allowed him to become everything from a heroic Autobot leader to a beloved children's character, and even an unforgettable creature sound. His career continued remarkably late into life. His final theatrical Transformers appearance came with Rise of the Beasts in 2023, and his later work included an appearance connected to The Masked Singer in 2024 and a role as Thetis in the 3rd season of Invincible, according to reports on his career. In 2023, he was also honored with a Lifetime Achievement Award, a recognition that reflected just how much his work had meant to the television and voice acting industries. So when fans now look back at his career, they are not looking at one isolated performance. They are looking at decades of voices, characters, and memories. They are remembering the first time Optimus Prime spoke. They are remembering Eeyore's unmistakable delivery. They are remembering the surprise of discovering that the same actor could create so many completely different personalities. And perhaps most importantly, they are remembering the feeling those performances created. Peter Cullen understood something that great voice actors often understand better than anyone. A voice does not need to be loud to be powerful. His Optimus Prime was commanding because it sounded certain. His Eeyore was memorable because it sounded vulnerable. His other performances showed that a performer could disappear completely into a character without ever losing the emotional truth behind the voice. That is the part of Cullen's legacy that cannot be taken away by his death. The recordings remain. The films remain. The television episodes remain. The animated series remain. And every time someone hears Optimus Prime speak, Peter Cullen's performance will be there again. That is why his passing is not simply the end of a career. It is the end of a physical life that leaves behind a voice capable of continuing indefinitely. Fans may never receive the dramatic final interview they are searching for, and there may never be a public explanation of the exact circumstances that led to his passing. Unless his family chooses to share more, those details may remain private. But perhaps the most powerful final image is already the one that has been confirmed. Peter Cullen at home in Los Angeles, surrounded by family, after a lifetime spent giving audiences characters they would never forget. The man who taught Optimus Prime to sound strong enough to lead and gentle enough to care has now left the stage. But the message he helped create will continue through every generation that hears that voice. Peter Cullen passed away at 85, but Optimus Prime's voice did not disappear with him. It became part of entertainment history, part of childhood memories, and part of the lives of millions of people who may never have met Peter Cullen personally, but still felt like they knew him every time he spoke. And maybe that is the real final chapter. Not a mysterious last interview, not an unconfirmed warning sign, and not a single final hour that the public can completely reconstruct, but a lifetime of work powerful enough to outlive the man who created it. Peter Cullen's final moments may belong to his family, but his voice belongs to generations. And long after the headlines fade, one familiar sound will still remind the world of the man who gave Optimus Prime his soul.